name's Lorne Epstein. I'm the host of the Lorne Epstein Show. And welcome for another episode. You're listening to 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Today, we are going to talk about what it's like to be a journalist. For a couple of reasons. One, I met these two amazing journalists about a month or so ago, and I thought, wow, they have really fantastic stories about what they do. I wanted to share that with you. But then also kind of talk about what's been going on in our culture, particularly in the, well, I think solely in the political realm, of disparaging the news media, which is not something that I've had in my lifetime, and I think it's really important. The mission, well, I'm paraphrasing, but the mission of the Arlington Independent Media is to support the freedom of expression, and that's where we broadcast from. WERA is a radio station at Arlington Independent Media here in Arlington, Virginia, and I think most people believe in your right to free speech, or at least your right to have a space, a platform to share your thoughts. And that's what this show is, and all the shows that play on 96.7, which you should always listen to because it's an amazing station. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So with me, my two fantastic guests is Rob Pegoraro.
Yes, Pegoraro. They're both
Pegoraro.
right. If you throw in random consonants and make it a little cranky, or pause stuck halfway through, that happens sometimes.
So, which I just did. So Rob's a journalist and writes about computers, gadgets, telecom, the internet, and things that beep or blink. He actually covered low power FM, which this station is low power FM. He covered it for 18 years.
Now the debate I think went on from about 2000. People were arguing for opening new space on the FM.
Yeah, so he knows
FM
about
band in like maybe 2000 or so, but it wasn't until 2011 or 12 where it finally became a reality.
Right. Well, I'm glad you covered it because it happened. And that's, again, the power of journalism. You can find Rob covering policy issues at Yahoo Finance, answering consumer tech questions at USA Today, offering telecom guidance at the Wirecutter, and showing up at various online and print outlets. He has met most of the founders of the internet and once received a single-word email reply from Steve Jobs. We're going to find out what that later.
Please ask.
Thanks for being on the show, Rob.
Yeah.
And Rob lives like walking distance.
Yep. I'm going to Whole Foods after this. I got to get some groceries.
That's awesome. And also with us is Tajha Chappellet-Lanier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a wonderful name. So Tajha is a technology reporter at FedScoop. FedScoop is a federal technology.
Yeah, federal IT. So
Federal IT.
Less about policy, more about the technology that exists within the federal government, especially federal agencies, and how the government achieves its mission or its variety of missions through technology.
Cool. So Tajha has worked at Technically, DC, NPR, and USA Today. She mentors startups on how to approach the media and was named a Washingtonian Tech Titan for 2017. If she had a superpower, it would be navigating foreign metro systems. Welcome to the show, Tajha. That's an awesome superpower. Is that like something that you need? Because I can get you maps.
No, I'm good at that.
Oh, you're good at that.
So if I had superpowers existed, that would probably be mine.
I see. So you're pretty amazing at that.
I consider myself pretty good at that.
Did you grow up in a city with a metro?
No, I grew up in the country.
Wow.
But I have a deep love of metro systems.
Cool. What's your favorite metro system?
Probably Madrid. I lived in Madrid for 2 years, so biased maybe. But it's great, it's fast, it's cheap, it's clean. And it goes to the major international airport in Madrid in about 30 minutes from downtown.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Sounds a little bit like Barcelona's. They only just opened the metro extension to the airport. The nice thing is it's a driverless train, so you can sit in the very front car and see the tunnel in front of you.
Nice.
Really neat.
So a computer drives it.
Yep.
Well, so let's talk about your origin stories.
Okay.
It's funny. I don't think before we had this deluge of superhero movies, the word origin story was really in my lexicon, but now it is. So I'm interested in what did you do that kind of got you into, was it like, reading journalism, or what made you want to become a journalist?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I always loved writing as a kid. I would write plays a lot when I was a kid, and stories, and I loved that. And when I was in high school, we had a career day, and as in the career day, you got to pick like 4 different disciplines, and you got to go and meet with a bunch of people in each of those disciplines. And I was very serious, and I picked journalism, law, politics, and something else that was also probably pretty serious. In retrospect, this was the wrong approach. I should have just gone for like careers that I didn't consider, or I wasn't seriously considering, so I'd learn about something outside of my comfort zone. So pro tip to high schoolers there. But the journalism one was actually very formative to me, and not perhaps in the way you would expect. This was probably 2007 or 2008. And so I had a panel of local journalists in front of me, a lot of print media, and they were very, very scared because print media was dying, and they didn't know what was going to happen next, and they thought nothing was going to happen next. They thought what they had devoted their lives to was just going to go away. And in some ways, at that like granular local level, they're sadly kind of right. But journalism has evolved and grown in new ways since then. And so it was really depressing to be in the room. They were like, I came away thinking no one should ever be a journalist. It's a depressing, awful career, and you're probably going to die alone and with diseases. I don't know. Like, it was terrible. And so I walked out of the room and thought, well, I guess I like writing, but I'm not going to be a journalist because you can't. It's impossible. It's a dying profession. And I went to college and I studied politics and international law, a little philosophy. I loved that. But I always knew I didn't want to work in politics. I just liked studying it. And when I was about to graduate from college, I thought, all right, I still really want to be a journalist despite that panel of really depressing journalists. So I'm going to apply to every single internship I can find. And if I get one of them, I will go and do that and see what happens. And if I don't get it, I'll go work for an NGO. I don't know. And I got an internship.
So for those who are listening, an NGO is what?
Non-governmental organization, like some kind of think tank or I had all this background in politics and international law and policy and things, and I thought, yeah, go use that somewhere. So, yeah, I applied to so many internships, and I got exactly one of them, and it was fact-checking editorial columns at USA Today on the opinion page. And so I moved to D.C. I'd never been to D.C. before. And I commuted every day to Tyson's Corner. And I worked really, really hard, very long hours. And actually...
And when was this that you...
This was in the fall of 2014. And I loved it. In retrospect, like at the time I didn't really appreciate this, but it was a really great first job in journalism because when you're fact-checking things, you're like tearing apart. I mean, opinion pieces are sort of journalism, right? They're different, but there's still facts in there, and they're still trying to make an argument about something, and best case scenario, the facts are real and they're making a good argument. And so in order to fact check it, you're tearing apart this piece of writing that someone has put together and finding its component pieces and determining whether those component pieces are accurate and are being used in a way that's realistic, and then you put it back together. So I think I learned a lot about how you do journalism from like tearing it apart.
And then what happened?
And then I had an internship for 4 months. So at the end of that, actually there was another girl in the office who was interning for the investigative unit. And one day I was talking to her in the kitchen, and she said, "Yeah, NPR has this amazing internship. They bring in like lots and lots of interns, and I'm applying for it." And I'd never heard of that, but I thought, great. So I applied also. And I applied, I think, to like the national desk, which is sort of national news, and the politics desk. I thought maybe I'll get back to my politics roots and write about politics. And I applied to the social media desk. And the social media desk at NPR is kind of unique. It is apart in the most part from running your NPR Twitter account or your NPR Facebook account. it actually it steps back and thinks more like broadly about how NPR should be represented on social media. And I applied to that because I'd done, in addition to fact-checking editorials and opinion pieces at USA Today, I had started running their USA Today opinion Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and sometimes Instagram because I was young, I don't know, and I had extra time and they threw it at me and I started doing it. And so I'd sort of started to notice how news organizations were presenting themselves on social media and what about that was good and well done and interesting, what about it was really boring. And I had some thoughts about that, and apparently the team at NPR Social liked my thoughts on that, and so they hired me. And I went to NPR for 4 months, and when I arrived, my boss at NPR asked me, like, what's your goal for this internship? What do you want out of it? I was like, no one's asked me that before. And I said, I really want to write something. I really want to be a reporter. I want to be published. And that's one, if I write one story and it gets published on npr.org while I'm here, I will be happy. A week later, I had my first byline, I think. So it was awesome. Really quick. He made it happen. And I found a niche quite randomly and organically in technology, because the All Tech Considered blog at NPR was a little bit understaffed at that time. They were looking to hire someone, and the editor was looking for people from the rest of the newsroom to kind of fill in while they were understaffed. And so he was really receptive to me as an intern having ideas. You know, he had time to listen to me and work with my ideas, and so I got lucky there. Yeah.
And now you're at FedScoop.
Yeah. So then once I left NPR, I had a hiatus for a little while. I went and traveled in China randomly, and I started looking for reporting jobs. It was really hard. I applied to so many jobs. And then...
How many jobs do you think? 20, 30, 40, 50?
Probably in the 50 range, right, at least. And I got really far with some of them down the interview path. But it was challenging because most of my proven skills were in this social media realm, and so people expressed a lot more interest in hiring me to do social media for the news organization than they did in hiring me to write. And I wanted to write, and so I was trying to pivot myself, but it's really hard to do. And I found a friend of a friend was writing for Technically DC, and she was leaving, and our mutual friend knew that I was looking for a job, and so he introduced us, and I met with her, and I talked with the founder of Technically. Technically is like a network of local tech news publications on the Eastern Seaboard. It's based in Philly and then has publications in Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Delaware, Baltimore, and D.C. And D.C. is the youngest of those 5 blogs, and they were looking for someone to take it over, and they took a chance on me, and I worked for them for 2 years covering local startups being built in the DC area. And then about 2 months ago, I left Technically DC and started writing for FedScoop. And now I'm in the federal government world.
Cool. So it's been quite an interesting route. I mean, you got here, but it wasn't like you couldn't see that going from the past. It's just you went from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and now you're here, which is pretty common in most people's careers. Yeah,
I think, you try and make the best, everything makes more sense looking back on it.
That is true.
So,
that is always true. The more you have time, the more everything makes more sense. So, Rob, you've been a journalist for a while, I think.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, first I was hatched. No, wait, that's the wrong story. No, I always liked...
you don't look like you were hatched.
I always liked reading and writing as a kid, much like Tajha. And In college, I went to Georgetown, got an international relations degree. But after halfway through my freshman year, I started spending a lot of time working at one of the two school papers, the Georgetown Voice. And then, as I think,
did you just hear the Village Voice? Total tangential. The Village Voice, 60 years in paper print, is just got now stop paper print.
Yeah, well, I'm not totally surprised.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
But yeah.
Go on.
Anyways, Georgetown Voice. I think it was probably modeled a little bit after the Village Voice. It was launched in the 60s as a sort of, alternative to the Hoya, the mainstream paper. And once you're spending 20, 30 hours a week at a place where you're not getting course credit and you're not getting paid, it means two things. One is you're easily exploited. The other is you probably really like what you're doing. And so I kept doing that through all 4 years. Had a couple of internships at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. That was first fact-checking stories, and the second one where they actually paid me. That also included, editing these really long and kind of boring stories by, various think piece type things about one problem in the world or another. And then I got hired at the Washington Post, which sounds much better than it actually was. I got hired as a copy aide, which is the gender-inclusive term for copy boy. So I was answering phones on the good days, sorting mail. So I'd like to think I'd still do very efficiently. And, running faxes around the newsroom, this being
Do you get the mail at home 1993. And then kind of sort it for everybody in the family?
Well,
zip, 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 zip.
It's all catalogs these days. And there are never enough checks from people I've invoiced. And so for a while I was in this, angsty spot where people would say, "You work at the Post, that's so cool." I'm like, "No, it's not." But someone had said, these sections, they do assign the occasional freelance story. And if you're in the newsroom, people already know who you are. And so I sold a couple of pieces to the financial section. Then I happened to be filling in, answering the phones in Weekend the week they were launching this new technology section called Fast Forward. And they were trying to launch it with basically 1.5 full-time equivalents. So, of course, the editor was swamped. So I said, well, let me help out. Wrote a couple of reviews for that and eventually became the editorial assistant. And then through a sequence of events I still couldn't quite understand, they made me the editor of the section, which by that time was smaller, but still, I'm not quite sure they knew what they were doing. I certainly didn't. And stayed at the Post for all of 17 years until then they, after a long round of cutbacks in technology reporting, they got rid of my column, paid me a nice amount of money to leave. I will give a shout-out to the Washington-Baltimore Newspaper Guild for helping to negotiate a better exit for me. And then I discovered this is a useless bit of career advice for young journalists. It's not that hard to start a freelance career if you first spend 11 years writing a technology column for a major newspaper and then leave when no one expects you to. Then the offers kind of come to you. I've now been freelancing full-time for about, April 2011, 6 years and change. So for a variety of clients, the one I've been writing for the longest is USA Today, where I do the Q&A column. For Yahoo Finance, that's been running for various Yahoo sites for about 3 years now. I maintain a few guides at a review site called The Wirecutter, I think you mentioned. And then it's various other clients as they come up.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'd like to hear from both of you why. Like a little bit more about the why. Hi, I'm Lorne Epstein, and you're listening to The Lorne Epstein Show, where we talk about jobs, careers, and the workplace, here on 96.7 FM. If you're interested in being on the show, you can give me a call at 240-876-0276 or email me at Lorne, Lorne, at electriccow.com. You can check out our Facebook page, which is Lorne Epstein, and also our Mixcloud account. So if you go to mixcloud.com, Lorne Epstein, you'll find our shows. Thanks so much. Welcome back to the Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Today we're talking about what it's like to be a journalist or reporter, and we're going to talk about that word too in a little bit. But so Rob, tell us why.
I'm curious. I like to find out how things work, what's going on.
Yeah.
To be able to explain, this is the reason why your phone does this when you do that. Here is why, figuring out your privacy settings is so difficult in this app or that. Here is why you can't even, no one seems to make an app that solves this problem that actually exists. And in the technology field, I have the great fortune of doing so when a lot of the history is still being written. The part about, I have met Tim Berners-Lee, humble brag, the guy who invented the World Wide Web. I've talked to Vint Cerf, the co-author of the TCP/IP, the core architecture of the internet, multiple times. So it's really neat to be able to tell the story when it's still being written and the people who started it are still around to shed a little insight. Lots of people write about like electrical utilities, and none of them have been able to interview Thomas Edison. So it's nice. It's lucky timing. It's good to be around here.
Right.
And this is definitely an area where, there's a demand for this kind of help. Right. And by technology, I mean not just what happens in Silicon Valley, but decisions that get made here in Washington that determine whether or not this business model is going to be possible, or you can do this kind of research into, say, the security of an app or a device.
So I think this is the first time I've had guests where I have this kind of similarity in that we all like to tell stories, which is what it seems like you like to do too, Tajha. And Rob, I mean, you guys, you started out writing plays and kind of sharing.
I've never written a play.
You've never written a play?
No, not yet. I mean, maybe I should.
And you like to tell stories?
Yes.
Yeah, so what makes a good story?
For me, I think I consider myself pretty curious about how things work and why, but I'm very curious in humans, in people, and like what drives them to do the things that they do. And I think that every person has a really interesting story to tell. And so this gets me into all kinds of weird situations where I have long conversations with unexpected humans that I meet in unexpected places. But I love that, and I get to do that all the time for my work.
I'd be absolutely.
So I think like a willing human, and then from the journalist.
Well, wait, hang on, because you said something. I mean, I'd be remiss in not asking you, what weird situation did you get in with what person?
Well, so I have
one story.
Yeah, I have my friends make fun of me and say that I should start like a newsletter or something about my experience in ride shares like Uber, Lyft, any of the others. I always talk with my drivers. I always sit in the front seat and I always talk with my drivers, and I always have really interesting conversations with them. And then, I'll show up at the party or wherever I am and I'll be like, oh, you'll never guess. So Jim was an electrical engineer in Kenya. And like, I'll have this whole story about where this person came from and what they're interested in and what they want to do with their lives. There was a guy who was starting a food truck who showed me pictures of it. It's great. I love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good story?
So
we still haven't answered the good story question.
Yeah, a good story is always one where I learned something I didn't expect to. Maybe my entire original premise going into the piece turns out to be incorrect, and so I learned something that way. I always like trying to figure out a situation where there's some sort of abuse of power going on. That drives a lot of tech policy around here. You can almost literally tell how some issues are going to play out. Be an architecture critic. Look at the buildings in which each party on each side of the issue is hosted in. Whichever group has the really nice K Street office building or 16th Street or whatever, and the other one is in some townhouse in Upper Northwest, the people in Upper Northwest are going to get rolled. So I can't necessarily stop that, but I can at least document, here's what's going on, here's how I don't think how this is being sold to you is not true. It's funny, low power FM is a great example of that, because for years, people in the mainstream radio industry, and not just Big FM, the National Association of Broadcasters, but even NPR were saying, we can't do this. It's going to allow too much interference. It'll make a lot of stations, unlistenable on the air. Well, they were wrong, since, this station has been around a while. LPFM has been a reality now for years and years. And I would like to think I was able to do a little bit of unpacking this to explain, you take another look at what the arguments are being sold here, because it's not quite so.
I love the way you guys are describing what you think a good story is, because some people might say, it's certain form, right, certain structure. But for you, it's very personal. I know for me, too, I like the stories that we tell here that kind of inspire me, that make me think differently about things. That's why I wanted to have you both on, because you're really making me think about journalism very differently than I guess I may have before, that there's always been this romance, about a lot of careers. And I know that it's not true. But I still believe it, and maybe I kind of want to believe it, but there's, even most recently with the Netflix show House of Cards and all the journalism that goes on there and the drama around.
No, bad things happen to all the journalists there. That's not inspirational at all.
No, but those the people with the putting in the good fight, right? Like the older guy
before they get killed.
I don't know if he hasn't gotten killed yet.
Yeah. I'm a little behind. No spoilers.
Okay, I was actually extra on last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. So, but I appreciate you sharing, the kind of the reality of, you like doing it, and it seems like a lot of the work that you both have done has been kind of happenstance. Like you just offered yourself up at the right place at the right time, and like any other job, someone gave it to you.
With the Post, it was a lot of it timing. When I started casting around for stories to sell, it was around like 94, 95, and even back then, there were 3 or 4 people at the Post who really knew the internet. They had accounts on The Well, this groundbreaking online forum based out of Berkeley. They knew their stuff. They knew their sources. They also had full-time jobs. So when, for instance, the style section said, we want people to write short little vignettes about interesting things they see online, and we'll pay you, $25 or $50 a pop, I could say. Me, I have an AOL account, and I need to pay off this modem. I just paid $300 to have put into my PowerBook. And, yeah, there was a demand, and I was in a position to fulfill it because I was willing to learn, and I was goofing off online anyways, and I needed the money. So
interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the current state of journalism. If you open up the newspaper, it's kind of hard to miss the whole new concept, the phrase fake news. And there is, it's almost funny, I almost can't remember if this has occurred before. I don't believe it has. But it seems like now there's this new attack against media, like all media, like a blanket. If you are a reporter, you're evil and bad and you lie to people. What do you think about that, and how's it affecting your work?
It's not. I mean, I don't care what people who have some ideological hostility to my occupation say about what I do. Like, if they're not speaking from a point of reason, the president can whine all he wants. We're going to do our job. And, if he wants to talk about failing news, look at subscription numbers for the Washington Post or the New York Times. It is certainly true.
Which are?
They're up and up. Like, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but both the NYT and the Post are kicking butt and uncovering a lot of stories that should be told. It is true that historically, people who complain vociferously about stories you write, they've always been around, but usually it's just been random readers or maybe a lobbyist or somebody who works at a company who's annoyed. I've had people call me and complain to me, like call me directly and ask for me to complain about what I did. And I'm like, well, thank you for calling, blah, blah, talk them off the ledge. It's new for the president to be yammering on like this, but there's a lot of things that are new with Mr. Trump in the White House. So
sure.
Why should we be any different from being the target of his abuse?
So, I grew up at the New York Times growing up in Brooklyn. And I never really doubted the veracity of the stories or the writers. It always seemed pretty solid. And at times when the news, and I say the news, journalism, or generally, would say something about the government or about this, unless the government kind of contradicted it, you thought of it as fact. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think also...
Because you write about the government.
Yeah, I have an interesting experience, and I guess this is maybe a symptom of living in a very liberal location. But the response I get to being a journalist is almost like more praise now that Trump is being kind of a jerk about it than it was before. Like, now when I say I'm a journalist, people are like, oh my God, thank you for the work you do. And I'm like, well, I'm not that journalist, but thanks. It's nice. I like that.
But you write about the government, what the government does in IT.
I do.
And you make statements about what you would consider fact.
Yes.
Do people argue those facts?
Regular readers, generally not. I think, I don't know. I guess sometimes. But I do a lot of research, right? And I try and determine what the right facts are, and I talk to people in the government who are running these projects or IT systems, and I get an understanding from them of what the facts are, and then I report based off of that. So if I'm doing my job correctly, I'm understanding what's real and like telling it to an audience that might not be familiar with the fact that it's happening.
So you said you did fact checking, and I wanted to get this question out first. What is a fact?
Well,
What do you consider a fact?
So when I would fact check these like 6,000 word think piece opinion stories, you basically take a red pen or pencil. Did you use a red stylus at some point at some type of USA Today?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I would do a lot of it online, but or not online, but like on a computer, but I would still like mark.
We were using WordPerfect for DOS at the time, so I really had to use a printout. So underline every thing that looks like a fact. Is it a date, a place name, spelling of someone's name, saying that something happened at this point in time? And yeah, you go find a source for it. You go find a site. And you don't have to do that if it's clearly someone's analysis, somebody saying that, this policy decision was a poor call. You can then look at the facts underlying that. I think it's good training. I wish I like to think if I had time to actually print out everything I write and then do the same red underline treatment, I would not have to request as many corrections as I have to do some weeks. But yeah, there's definitely if you don't think there's objective truth, then I guess I'd say, how do you live your life? If you're in that sort of existential angst,
sure,
then you don't need me. Maybe you need to talk to a priest, a rabbi, an imam, and somebody else who can provide some grounding in your life, because things happen and it's our job to document them.
So when getting into the nuts on this, the nuts and bolts, but a fact is something when if I were to say, for example, okay, there are 5 million people that live in Washington, D.C., you would then go look that up and use one source or two sources to corroborate?
I'd look at the current U.S. Census site. They have latest American Community Survey numbers, or maybe only a year or so out of date.
So one source?
Well, it's the government. They count the noses, so that suffices.
Okay, and that level of, you think that's a very high level of accuracy?
Yes.
Okay. And so what says to you this is a high level of confidence, this source is good? Because let's say it's, Bob said ABC. And then you're like, well, how do I know that? Well, you can call Bob. He might say no, but then do you call Mary, who was also listening, and say, did Bob say this?
So I'll give you a different example. So there are some numbers where it's not as obvious what is the situation. So, I just did a story for USA Today about a new Verizon unlimited plan that's cheaper, but also really guts some of the attractive features. I call it the basic economy of unlimited data. And one of the things you can't usefully do on this new plan is use your phone as a mobile hotspot. You can do it, but any devices you tether via Wi-Fi are limited to 600 kilobits per second, that would have seemed fast to me when I was using this modem in my PowerBook in 1994, but now it's awful, unusable.
Yeah.
Even the worst airport Wi-Fi would be better than that.
I don't think anybody talks about kilobits anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I probably should have explained it to readers. And so I thought, well, how many people actually tether? I asked 3 different analysts, and one of them had actually, NPD Group, they did this opt-in monitoring system where they just track your use anonymously, and they use that to compile data about the industry that they can use to put together reports, sell to companies and investors and whatnot. And they said, our numbers show about 20% do it at least once a month. And something like 6 of those, 16% do it daily. And that at least seemed plausible to me. I did not present that as this is the absolute truth, but this is this firm whose work I've known for years, quoted them at length. They know what they're doing. They're not some fly-by-night operation. So that seems sufficient to illustrate this, given that I'd also talked to other people. This one other guy said, I haven't seen any numbers, but I suspect it's definitely not a majority. And also, I've spent literally 10, 15 years writing about mobile phones of one kind or another. So I'm not new to the industry.
Mm. So, Tajha, what do you consider a fact?
So I think when you're fact-checking, like Rob said, there are some really basic things that you consider facts, like places, times, dates, names. All of those need to be correct and spelled correctly. Numbers are a really big thing. And
numbers, they're the worst.
They're the worst?
I have a history of typing one number another wrong.
And so those, that's the basis of where you can start to fact check, and because those are the kind of facts that are used to then kind of tell a story that's more than the sum of those facts, but is a plausible sort of continuation of what those facts are.
So the facts, in a way, the way you're framing it, it sounds like, is the facts are the framework. They're the structure by which you hang the story.
Let me give you another example.
No one's going to agree with me? Come on, someone tell me I'm right. You can tell me I'm wrong.
Net neutrality, the whole issue of we have these rules.
Well, wait, I don't want to, because you were talking. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
Okay. I don't want to interrupt your thought. I may have stopped you, but...
No, I don't think so. I think, I guess facts aren't, like, you're not going to read a story that is just facts. That doesn't exist, right? That's like reading, I don't know, the census data. Like those are just facts.
I do find reading box scores to be oddly, enjoyable, and that is it's just numbers, and this many errors, this many home runs, this many left on base.
And then maybe you make the story in your mind of what it means.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so you're not going to read a story that's just facts. So when you like read a piece of journalism, someone has taken what they earnestly believe to be facts, and hopefully someone has checked, or at least one person has checked, and then like built something on it, and that's a challenging thing to do, but that's why making sure the facts are correct and there and reflective of or like fit into the world that you're building with them, that they're in there is important.
So net neutrality, one of the big reasons trotted out for not having these rules, saying that your internet provider cannot block certain sites or slow others or charge others for priority access to your computer, is that, these rules are suppressing investment. Internet providers are not expanding their services, their networks because of this.
So I want to just, because it's a very interesting topic you're bringing up. So net neutrality means
your ISP has to treat
your internet service company, the internet service provider,
any sort of legal application, site, or service. Like they don't have to treat malware or spam equally with legitimate email and the movie you want to watch on Netflix, but they can't privilege they can't charge Netflix extra, so Netflix has guaranteed delivery, whereas maybe Hulu or DirecTV Now, they have to wait in line.
So in other words, controlling how much bandwidth comes. So like if I watch Netflix, it's basically the same speed as if I watch Hulu, if I go to Amazon, if I go to this website or that website.
So there are lots of different.
Basically have to
it's very complicated once you get from your ISP to the rest of the internet, but it is your internet provider basically can't turn your connection into a two-sided market. They can't charge somebody else to get that little extra bit of speed, which is something that a lot of ISPs talked about doing from like 2005 to 2010.
Right.
Like people can't say this worry about interference from ISPs came from nowhere. So anyway, the question is, we've had these rules in effect since the start of 2015. Have they suppressed investment? Well, you will see people who oppose rules saying, well, look at the average across these top 12 companies. You actually look at those, well, wait, Comcast has invested a lot in their network. Sprint has not. One cable company, I think like Charter or Time Warner Cable had not. They were in the middle of a merger. So you can look at that. In each case, there's separate stories, separate trends going around. But wait, are the dollars in 2016 buying as much broadband investment as in 2014? The former chair of the Federal Communications Commission made this point. I had to actually figure out where he'd gotten this number from, since the text didn't cite that. Found the exact thing. It was the CTO of AT&T bragging at an investors conference. Yeah, what we spend now, we get like twice the bill that we did 2 years ago. So wait a minute, maybe you can't compare the dollars, dollar to dollar that way. And finally, what about the actual improvement in coverage by internet providers, choice people have, the speeds available to them? And that's an area where, funny enough, many of the same trade associations that hate the net neutrality rules are bragging about what a good job they've done. Well, you can't have it both ways. If these rules if this is the jackpot of the regulatory state preventing you from building out your network, why are you bragging about being able to do just that?
And what you're really saying is that I'm wrong about having a framework being the facts. And
well, this is a case where
it's really a combination of things.
Yeah, there are many ways you can answer it, and in each case you could say, yes, it's absolutely true that this survey of capital investment, CapEx by these top 12 ISPs, shows a slight decline. You could say that, the total number of homes reached has improved. And, each of those cases, the fact is correct, but they can lead you astray. So it is, how do you frame the story? How do you line this up? Are you watching for holes in your own argument? Maybe there's some other issue to it that I'm missing that makes the anti-net neutrality rules argument look better than I am making it look.
I think
hang on, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. And we're also going to talk about what it's like to be a journalist now. Like, what is the work? And so think about those things when we come back in just a minute. My name's Lorne Epstein. I'm the host of The Lorne Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. If you're interested in being on the show or have a show idea, give us a call at 240-876-0276. You can follow us on Mixcloud under The Lorne Epstein Show. Welcome back. My name is Lorne Epstein. You're listening to The Lorne Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Today we're talking about what it's like to be a journalist. And my guests are Rob Pegoraro.
Yep.
And Tajha Chappellet-Lanier.
Yeah.
All right. Getting good at this. You should come back next week. So we were going to talk about what it's like to actually be a reporter now. Like, what's the day like? So we talked about some of the fundamentals, what facts are. So whoever would like to start, what does your day consist of? What do you do?
Well, it really depends on the specifics of your job. So my day is probably doesn't bear any resemblance to any other journalist's day, I will say that. I mean, some resemblance, but limited resemblance. And this is fresh in my mind because I just transitioned jobs, and the way I spent my day in my previous job was very different. But now I work mostly from an office. We have a kind of small newsroom of folks, and I would say I know for myself that I write better in the morning. I like to spend that time writing, and I like to push any kind of interviews or...
well, let me stop you for just a second. So when you say writing, so like what time do you start writing?
Around 9. 9
in the morning.
Yeah.
And so when you start writing, is it an idea that you got the day before or that morning, or it's just kind of been percolating?
It depends. I mean, sometimes it's a story that I've been working on for a little while, so I may have come across the story idea the day before and done some interviews the afternoon before, and then, I get to writing first thing the next morning.
And do you write a few stories at the same time?
Sometimes. That also depends, like, there's relatively little breaking news in the world of government IT, but every now and then again there is something, like there's a lot of personnel news is kind of the moment, and so sometimes I'll be writing something and a piece of news will come up, and that takes priority, and so sometimes I will have a story that I work on very slowly over the course of days, weeks even, that is just kind of in the background, and I'll write a little bit every day.
And do you have an editor that tells you kind of what to write?
No. I mean, I have an editor who I can bounce ideas off of, who, if I come across something, we can kind of decide together whether it seems like a story that's interesting, or if he sees something that he thinks I should be paying attention to, he'll send it my way. But he doesn't explicitly tell me what to write and what not to write. It's more collaborative.
And I don't want to forget this question, but is the income that you make, is it livable?
Yes.
You have to tell us what it is, but that's good. It's a living wage.
Yeah, it's a new thing for me, but it's very exciting.
Cool. And Rob, what's your day like?
So I don't work in an office. I freelance from my home. So the day varies a lot, even by the season. Right now, this is, it's still day camp season, so I've got to drop off her daughter, and usually my wife will do the pickup. And so there's these little things that sort of interrupt my work, which I try to use as time to sort of process things mentally. Usually, because we have a kid, I wake up obnoxiously early. I used to sleep in all the time. I don't need an alarm clock anymore. So I wake up around like 6:30 or 7, check my email, and I might send a few messages out. I'm always trying to keep track. Where in the world is this person trying to reach located? If they're in like the EU, then I'd better get the email out first thing in the morning so they could see it before they leave. If they're on the West Coast, I got 2 hours before I need to work, before it'll make any sense to try to bother them. And because usually I'm working on different stories for different clients, I will have multiple windows open, and also will send a couple of emails for one story or line up a phone call for another. When I do leave the office, it's more often for things like there may be, so like last week, there's this Hyperloop competition going on outside Los Angeles. Next
so
to
the Hyperloop, if you're not aware, is this concept where you have a vacuum tube, and then inside the vacuum tube you have a train or some kind of car that scoots through this vacuum tube very, very quickly along magnetic levitation. And it's in New York City, we had department stores and banks would use these things to shoot messages.
Pneumatic tubes, yes.
Pneumatic tubes. And then Elon Musk came out and talked about this notion of a Hyperloop, and now we have the Hyperloop.
And so this team at the University of Maryland has built a pod to put into the so it's a sort of simple competition where SpaceX they're going to have a sort of pusher plate that'll send each pod down this 1 mile long test track, and then it's up to the people on the pod. They can have their own propulsion or they can just coast. This particular UMD entry, it magnetically levitates inside the track, has no other propulsion. So I got to look at it up close. A nice piece of work. I appreciated that some of the rivets were in UMD's, red, yellow, and black colors. Real attention to detail there. Talked to the people who worked on it, and then drove home, worked on the story a bit, did a little more fact checking. When you get to a situation where it's just one presentation, whether it's a company launch event, somebody has a new phone or a tablet, or it's you're looking at a demo where it's only one side, or just you're talking to one person who's a security expert, you want to make sure that you're not getting spun. So I always try to do some other reading up on the issue and talk to somebody else who's been in the field. So I will often, I do actually leave my home occasionally for work, and that's nice.
So it's a lot of typing, a lot of research.
Yeah.
A lot of talking to people.
Yeah. A lot of time on the phone. So it's...
Is it hard?
No.
Or do you feel like it's, as both of you, is it, where would you say the challenges are in the work itself?
For me, it's probably just time management. Because I work from home, it's always easy, especially in the spring if it's nice. I really like gardening. So if I look out and see maybe some plant, some flower that should be moved, I have to resist the impulse to run downstairs, grab a shovel, and get to it, because I could do it. No one's going to stop me from doing that. I like what I do. Where it gets difficult in terms of you lose sleep, you're spending a lot of time, is if you go to an event like CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, where there's all this stuff going on. It's 4 days of just compressed tech news in Las Vegas right after New Year's Day, when really I would rather just be easing back into work like a normal person instead of flying to the city in the desert,
sure,
and getting spun all the time by people in suits.
So, Tajha, what would you tell folks, young folks, if they want to get into journalism, what would be your advice? Or old folks, I guess, anybody.
That's a good question. I guess I would try to be more positive than I feel like a lot of people were in my life. For example, the panel of really depressing journalists who I met early on. I think that I'd say that it's possible. That's probably a starting point. If you really want to be a journalist, there are a lot of opportunities to do so. There are a lot of amazing stories out there in the world that need to be told. So, good for you. Go for it. It is not easy to accomplish. I feel really, really lucky every day to get to do something that I love so much, and I think every journalist I've met feels the same way, just how did this happen? How did I get so lucky? But yeah.
Would you say go to journalism school?
I didn't go to journalism school.
No, I didn't either.
So I don't know that I would say that necessarily. I think that it's a lot about trying to find, I guess I would say where I had luck, and, keeping in mind that it's always a changing industry. And so someone coming along now is facing a very different set of challenges than I faced even a few years ago. But I would say where I had luck was sort of looking at the landscape and trying to, in a broad sense, but also in a very narrow sense of where am I right now? What are the resources that I have in front of me? What niche can I fill? And that got me into interesting places. USA Today kind of offered me this opportunity to run some social media, which got me into NPR, which got me in front of the tech editor where I could get my first byline. And that, like, social media is not something that I would have thought was an inherently interesting door into journalism for me.
But it got you in.
But it got me in the door.
And Rob, what would be your advice to someone who's looking to get into journalism?
I would say, the economics in this industry can look pretty terrible, but although it can be hard to believe sometimes, if you spend any time on the internet, people don't want to be stupid. They don't want to be uninformed. And if you can get to the point where you're good at learning things and figuring out patterns and explaining this stuff to people, there is a market for that. It may not look like the way it does now. I mean, if you talked to 10 years ago, obviously you would want to get hired at, a big American newspaper. Now you put maybe BuzzFeed. They're doing great work. They've hired a couple of good friends of mine. So
or Politico.
Yeah. Well, now Politico's the old thing. It's the Axios. Right. Actually, they hired one of my former coworkers from the Post. So
all right. So we got just another minute left. What news? I want some news. So what do you got?
News. Well, so
you're talking to all of Arlington, Virginia, and probably the world.
Right, yeah.
This is exciting. This is not super newsy news, but I'm working on a story about the Department of Veterans Affairs has a Center for Innovation where the VA is the largest healthcare system in America, and so they have this, like, despite all the horrible things you've probably heard about the VA, kind of an amazing opportunity to innovate in healthcare because they just have so much of it. And so they started this Center for Innovation and an innovators network that kind of brings VA facilities across the country together to collaborate, use design thinking and human-centered design and things like that to create better healthcare experiences, both from, like, a really simple perspective of, like, what is the person's experience walking into the clinic and how does the HR work at the clinic, but also tech solutions.
That's awesome. And how do people reach you, real quickly, because we're about to run out of time?
Yeah,
how do folks reach you?
No worries. I am always on Twitter at Tajha Lanier, THAHALANIER. It's a great place to reach me.
Rob, did you come up with a story idea you want to share?
So a bunch of things. One of the big stories I'm just paying attention to because it's been spinning out for the last few years, the gradual death of the traditional TV bundle. People are dropping cable and satellite. It keeps going and going. You're having more and better options online, but it is kind of a confusing mess, which to me means hopefully lots more stories I can still explain this stuff.
Awesome. Cool. And how do folks reach out to you?
At Twitter, at Rob Pegoraro, ROBPEGORARO.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you so much for coming. You've been a great guest. I think the folks listening have a much better sense of what it is to be in your shoes.
Good.
I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You've been listening to The Lorne Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. We will see you next week on another episode of The Lorne Epstein Show.